We've all heard of these other famous stories. The tragic story of Len Bias, who passed away 2 days after getting drafted in 1986 due to a cocaine overdose. He was the number 2 pick, a tremendous prospect and arguably the biggest what-if in NBA history. There's also the story of Reggie Lewis. In 1993, Lewis would collapse in the middle of practice. He suffered a sudden cardiac arrest and passed away shortly after at the age of 27. While those 2 guys are the most well-known players who passed away during their rise to stardom, there's another guy who passed away shortly after his career was over. But his story was even more tragic. How's it going, folks? We're going to talk about Derek Smith, a second-round draft pick in 1982, who surprised everybody and he was on his way to NBA stardom. However, a series of awful events would lead to his downfall and then ultimately his death. Growing up poor in rural Georgia was a tough task for Smith and his family. His mother would raise him and his 5 other siblings in a small run-down house. A house that lacked indoor plumbing and proper flooring and was previously used as a slave cabin. For Derek, all he wanted to do was graduate high school and work at the mills, which is what everyone in his town did. But that would all change in high school as his basketball interest slowly grew and he became a household name. Not just in his small town of Hogansville, but also on the national stage. Smith was a physical freak and had the work ethic greater than his coach has ever seen. His recruitment to Louisville was a very interesting story, a fairly unique situation that helped him catch the attention of the coaches and directors. Bill Olson, the athletic director of the Louisville Cardinals, took notice of Smith even as a high schooler. Olson brought him to Louisville for a practice session and what he witnessed utterly shocked him. He described it as, quote, "It was probably the most unbelievable thing that I've ever witnessed in all of the recruiting I had done." Here was a kid that was barely 15, if he was that, and he was not developed but had long arms. He outworked everybody and his team had a lot of good athletes. And in every drill, Derek was going 100%. He never let up. I got goosebumps and chills just watching him. Olson was also in awe of the size of Smith's hands, claiming that the basketball in his hands looked like a volleyball. He could palm the ball so easily, almost like a magnet. Fast forward a bit to 1978 and Derek Smith would graduate high school early at just 16 years old and immediately joined the Louisville Cardinals. This was the big break him and his family needed, as now there's a clear path for him to make the NBA. In 1980, he would be the starting shooting guard of the team and help them win the 1980 NCAA championship. The year after, he would win the Metro Conference Player of the Year in 1981. Smith is also widely credited for inventing the phrase "high five," a phrase that literally everybody in the nation knows today and what it means. In an excerpt from the Louisville magazine, it stated, "It will forever be recorded in etymology books that the late University of Louisville basketball player Derek Smith popularized, if not coined, the term high five during the Cardinals' 1979-80 championship season." Whereas the gesture itself started decades before, the origin of the phrase, says none other than the Oxford English Dictionary, took hold in 1980 and found its first print use in an October 1980 issue of MacLeod's magazine. Smith, it should be noted, did take credit for inventing the language. Despite having a rather successful college career and being incredibly popular in his town, he was still under the radar in the big picture. Smith had nowhere near the name recognition of the main stars of his class. By 1982, he would finish college and enter the NBA draft. A draft that was headlined by big names like James Worthy, Terry Cummings, and Dominique Wilkins, all of whom would become all-stars and had amazing careers. Going down the draft, you also had other notable stars like Fat Lever, Sleepy Floyd, and Ricky Pierce. It was all around a decent draft class that saw many top prospects rise up in the NBA. Going down even further into this class, and you've got Derek Smith, the 35th overall pick by the Golden State Warriors. While he was hoping to get picked higher, this is still a great accomplishment, especially for a guy who didn't even know he would get his chance to play professional basketball. Smith's rookie season would be unspectacular, as he would rot away on the bench, but when he joined the Clippers the following year, his career would take off. In the 1984-85 season, he would become the full-time starting shooting guard and averaged 22 points a game, leading his team in scoring. Unfortunately, as a team, the Clippers struggled, winning just 31 games. Then, in the following season, Smith would continue his rampage. In the first 5 games of the 1985-86 season, Smith would average 25 points a game on 57% shooting. But more importantly, he led the Clippers to 5 straight wins to start off the year. Unfortunately, about a month into that season, he severely damaged his left knee. He played just 11 games that whole season, and it was an injury he would never recover from. Even after multiple surgeries, his left knee did not feel the same, and his athleticism was completely destroyed. That his knee was in such bad shape that there's no possibility of keeping him on the roster. So they let him go. For the rest of his career, he would be relegated to a role player and mainly came off the bench for the following teams he signed with. He was never the same again. He never realized his dreams of making the All-Star team, even though he was well on his way to do so before the injury. He never had the same explosiveness and energy he's always been known for. Al Attles, a former player and coach who briefly coached Derek in Golden State, spoke very highly of him. He said, quote, "If he hadn't hurt his leg, there's no telling how long he would have been an All-Star. I don't know who the toughest guard was, but I don't know anyone tougher than Derek." By 1991, at the young age of 29, Smith retired, as his knee problems started to become degenerative. The doctor said that if he continued to play at this level, he might not be able to walk after his NBA days are over. However, this wouldn't stop him from being a part of the NBA still. In 1994, he would join the Washington Bullets as an assistant coach, and he would remain on the coaching staff until his death. On August 10, 1996, Derek Smith was on a cruise with his wife and kids, along with a couple of teammates as well. It was one of the only times of his life when his friends and peers saw a different side of him. Instead of the tough, motivated athlete they've gotten accustomed to, they saw a family man, a guy who had a rough childhood and overcame all of that to get to where he was now, despite the horrific events in his career. In an article from the Baltimore Sun, it described the events of this cruise through the eyes of Judy Holland, a former executive on the Bullets. The article stated, "The cruise allowed others to see a side of Smith away from basketball. Judy Holland, a team vice president, sat with a friend talking with Smith as night fell on Friday, the final day of the cruise. Holland would say, 'To hear this guy say, I love my wife and nothing else means anything, was so refreshing. He was giving this incredible testimony about how life could be so wonderful.'" However, Derek's testimony ended in mid-sentence, when his head suddenly drooped to his shoulder. Holland said, "I thought he was joking. Derek?" He never answered. Medical staff tried to revive him, but nothing was successful. Derek Smith was gone. The cause of death was due to a heart condition from an abnormality in one of his valves, which was previously undetected by the medical staffs of various teams he played for. It also drew some controversy as well, as teams were wondering what in the world happened. In his playing days, he always went through medical just fine, nothing was wrong with his body, well, aside from his knees. So it was quite a shock to the NBA family that he suffered from this, and that he had this condition. There were some questions surrounding the NBA team's medical staffs too, but regardless, it's a bit too late for that. Smith would pass away on board the ship at the age of 34. And that's all, folks. That sums up the story of Derek Smith, an absolute tragedy that most people have never heard of. As a young player, he had a very bright future, averaging over 22 points a game at just 23 years old, and as a second-round pick. His journey from rags to riches was very inspirational, and from what everyone said about him, they knew he was on his way to becoming an all-star. But the debilitating injuries were terrible and prevented him from realizing his dreams. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave a comment on your thoughts about Derek Smith, and did you know him before I made this video? Hope you guys have a great day, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.